Hi, are you ready to learn about the very immense power of your own body in telling you when you are fertile? I am Stephanie Roth. I am a fertility coach and consultant with yourfertileself.com, and that is exactly what we are going to talk about today. Specifically, we are going to talk about your cervical fluid and its power in telling you when you are fertile, when it is time to start having intercourse to try for a baby during your cycle, if that is what you wish. If you're trying to prevent pregnancy, it is your cervical fluid will tell you when not to have intercourse to avoid pregnancy during your cycle. It is very, very powerful information, and I'm super excited to share it with you today. This might not be new information for some of you. You might already be tracking your cervical fluid. If that is the case, that is awesome, and I say keep it up. If you're not tracking your cervical fluid, you're going to learn today about the power that it has in giving you very useful information about your cycle and some tips on how to get started and what to look for and what the information is telling you. So let's go ahead and get started. First off, what is cervical fluid? Cervical fluid is fluid that is produced in your cervix. You may have also heard the term cervical mucus. You may have also heard the term vaginal fluid. So cervical fluid, cervical mucus, vaginal fluid, they're all describing the same thing. Cervical fluid and cervical mucus are the correct, accurate terms to describe this fluid. Vaginal fluid is not accurate because the fluid is not produced in your vagina. It's produced in your cervix. But that is a term that you might hear. And if you do hear that term, it is describing this fluid. But cervical fluid and cervical mucus are the correct terms. I tend to use the term cervical fluid. I don't really care for the word mucus. To me, mucus sounds gross. Mucus sounds like like what you have like when you have a cold and you have this phlegm in your body. It sounds like something unwanted. And cervical fluid is something that you want in your body, and it's beautiful and it's not gross. So I tend to use the term cervical fluid, and that's the term that I'm going to use today. But if you do hear the term cervical mucus, which you probably will, that is describing the same fluid. So cervical fluid is fluid that is produced in your cervix, and its purpose is to help sperm get to where they need to go to meet your egg. So its sole purpose in life is to facilitate your sperm's journey, your partner's sperm's journey to the egg for fertilization and conception. So it's very important. Cervical fluid, if you're trying to conceive, it's so, so, so important to understand in your cycle, and it's very important to have in your body. So if you're trying to conceive, it's very, very, very important to track your cervical fluid. Your cervical fluid will change throughout your cycle. And you want to know how to recognize when you have fertile quality cervical fluid, because that's telling you that that's the time to start trying to have having intercourse, to start for trying to have a baby. So it's very important. And if you're trying naturally, you absolutely, absolutely, absolutely must have an understanding of your cervical fluid. Even if you're in treatment, where your cycles are so regulated, so monitored, your doctor's really telling you what's going on and telling you what to do, it's still important, I think, to be tracking your cervical fluid so that you can have an idea of what's going on in your body and not be solely reliant upon your medical team to be giving you that information. So cervical fluid combined with charting your basal body temperatures is an amazing 1-2 punch. Like, the power of information from both of those methods when individually is amazing, but when taken together, it's incredibly, incredibly, incredibly powerful. So if you haven't watched my video yet on charting your basal body temperatures, I recommend you go back and watch that. It's on the same YouTube channel. And that talks about your basal body temperatures and what that tells you about your ovulation. Cervical fluid is also very powerful, and it gives you incredible information about your fertility. So I've recommended this book before, Taking Charge of Your Fertility by Toni Weschler. I wholeheartedly recommend it again and always. This gives all kinds of great information about basal body temperatures and also about cervical fluid and how to interpret your cervical fluid and what that tells you about your fertility. So I definitely recommend that everyone go pick this up and read it. So let's see. So we know it's very important now to check our cervical fluid when trying to get pregnant and even when trying to prevent pregnancy. The question is, how do you do that? Basically, it's very simple. You stick your finger up your hoo-ha, up your vagina, scoop some fluid out, and then observe the quality of what you have on your finger. That's all you need to do. It's very simple to do. It takes a few seconds. Probably do it 4 or 5 times a day and see what you find. If you are squeamish at all about sticking your finger up your vagina to see what's there, all I have to say to you is that you've just really got to get over that. If you want to conceive, especially if you want to conceive via natural conception, you need to have an understanding of your cervical fluid, and there's no way around it than just sticking your finger up your vagina and scooping some out and looking at it. I think we as women, we've been conditioned, I think, from a very young age that what's going on down there is gross and ugly and smelly, and we don't want to know anything about it. I believe the opposite. Our reproductive area is beautiful. It is what makes us women. What is going on there is very natural, and it is where we create new life within us, which is the most beautiful thing. And so I think it's really important and really beautiful and really wonderful to understand what is happening in that very important part of our bodies. So I encourage you to work through your squeamishness if you have it. And what you will discover about yourself is so amazing and so wonderful. So basically, that's what you do. When do you check your cervical fluid? Your cervical fluid does change throughout the day. So unlike your temperature, where you only need one data point in the morning, and that tells you everything that you need to know for that day, with your cervical fluid, you need more than one data point. It does change throughout the day, so you want to be checking it throughout the day. I recommend basically that you check your cervical fluid every time you go to the bathroom. Just before you use the bathroom, squat down, stick your fingers in your vagina, pull out some cervical fluid and look at it, and then you can go to the bathroom. So every time you go to the bathroom, so it's just kind of tied in with going to the bathroom, and it's quick and it's easy and it gives you so much wonderful information. So your cervical fluid does change throughout the day, which is why you want to be checking it several times a day. And really, if at any time during the day you see fertile quality cervical fluid, you know you're in your fertile window and you want to start having intercourse to try for a baby. So if you see fertile quality cervical fluid in the afternoon, but then you don't see any in the evening, that doesn't matter. You have seen fertile quality cervical fluid during that day, so you know you're in your fertile window. So you want to check it every time you go to the bathroom. Many of the apps, Fertility Friend, Ovia, Glow, a lot of the apps have a space on your chart where you can log your cervical fluid for that day. And this is really, really helpful, so it makes it really easy to keep track of. And you have that information about your cervical fluid along with your temperatures. All of your fertility-related information is all in one place, so you can really look at everything all together and look at the overall picture of what that is telling you about your fertility. So that's really helpful, and use the apps for that purpose. So I'm not really able to demonstrate how to check cervical fluid. I think if I did that, I would be banned from YouTube, banned from Facebook, banned from social media. So I'm not really able to show you on video how to check your cervical fluid, but I can give you some tips. So first, again, my first tip is to check whenever you go use the bathroom. Starting, I would say, probably on about day 8 of your cycle, after your period is done. Check every time you use the bathroom. Second, you want to wash your hands before you do it. You are putting your finger or your fingers inside yourself. You want to make sure your hands are clean. You want to prevent infection. You want to prevent bacteria. Wash your hands. It's a no-brainer, but I'm saying it anyway. Just wash your hands. Second, you probably want to make sure that your nails are trimmed. I don't think that it's harmful to your vagina or to your cervix or to the inside of your body if you're putting your finger there and you have long nails. I don't think it's harmful, but it might just be a little bit painful or just at the very least uncomfortable. So it's probably a good idea, again, another no-brainer, but probably a good idea to just kind of keep your nails trimmed for your own comfort. And let's see, you can use 2 fingers if you want. You can stick these 2 fingers kind of up there to scoop fluid out. Some people just use their pointer finger. I usually use my middle finger because it's longer. If you're like me and you don't produce a lot of cervical fluid, you might have to really reach up all the way up to your cervix to get some out, and so using a longer finger might be beneficial. So I use my middle finger. So you can use your middle finger, you can use these 2 fingers, you can use your pointer finger, really whatever works, whatever's easiest and most comfortable for you. So those are some tips. That's kind of a little bit of the why, the when, the how, some tips. Now I want to talk about the different types of fluids themselves and what they're telling you. So for the purposes of this discussion, I'm going to assume a 28-day cycle with ovulation on day 14. Now this is going to be different for everyone. We don't all have 28-day cycles. Even the same woman doesn't always have the same length cycle. This is just really for the purposes of discussion. It is going to be different for everyone. But I'm going to give you a brief overview of kind of what's happening during your cycle and how that manifests itself in your cervical fluid. So again, I don't actually have cervical fluid here to show you, but I do have props. So we've got different types of items that can mimic different types of cervical fluid. And here's another one. I'm not really able to tip it to show you, but there is fluid in here as well. So we're going to go through these and talk about them. And kind of these are different properties of different types of cervical fluid. And we're going to talk about kind of what they mean during your cycle and what they mean for your fertility. So here we go. In the beginning of your cycle, day 1, you get your period, assuming that you don't have a pregnancy. You get your period, and you usually have your period for about 4 or 5 days. The first day might be very, very heavy. Then you might have, a couple days of just sort of medium flow, and then maybe a day or 2 of light flow. So, 4 or 5 days, you might have a day of spotting after your period's over. But for basically, my periods are usually about 4 days. Yours might be a little longer, but basically 4 or 5 days, 3, 4 or 5 days is kind of the first few days of your cycle when you have your period. So what you observe then is your menses, your menstruation. After your period is over, you might experience a few days of dryness where there's really no fluid coming out. There's no fluid at all. This is just sort of your body gearing up after your period. It's cleaned itself out and it's gearing up for your next ovulation, and it's just kind of resting at that stage. You might be dry. Then, starting around day 7 or day 8 of your cycle, you might start to see some cervical fluid that is kind of tacky or gummy. Again, it's going to be different for everyone. You might see this and you might not. But this is sort of what this cervical fluid might look like. It's, dry, it's crumbly, it sort of has the consistency of like dried glue, like tack glue. Um, just again, very crumbly, very dry. This is not fertile quality cervical fluid. So if you have intercourse when you have this type of cervical fluid, it's not going to help you in achieving a pregnancy at all. This is very sticky. It's very gummy. It's very tacky. It's crumbly, as you can see. And again, you might see this and you might not. It's different for everyone, but this is one type of cervical fluid that you might see kind of right after your period. And again, this is not fertile quality stuff. Okay. Then you might see cervical fluid that is more like lotion. And this type of cervical fluid this is what it looks like. I've got some lotion here. It's, thick. It's white. It's kind of creamy. It's got the consistency of a lotion. Kind of soft. You can kind of rub it together. Again, like a lotion. This, and it could be clear. It could also be sort of this white color like a lotion. I produce this a lot. This is usually what I see during my period leading up to my fertile time. This is also not fertile quality cervical fluid. When you see that it's creamy or lotiony, this is not fertile stuff either. So if you have intercourse, when you have this kind of cervical fluid, it's also not really going to help you. But you might see this for, a few days leading up to your fertile period. This kind of lotiony, creamy stuff. So you might have the cream and the creamy, lotiony cervical fluid. You might have that for a little while. Starting again, assuming a day 14 ovulation, starting around day 10 or day 11, you might start to see cervical fluid that is more stretchy, that's more clear, that's maybe kind of like jelly, but it's very stretchy and very supple, and you can really stretch it and it won't break. This is called egg white cervical fluid, and I've got egg whites, actual egg whites in this bowl. I can't really tip it over or it'll fall out, but you can sort of see. This is, I'll show you. See, look at that. See how you can stretch your fingers and it stretches and it doesn't break. You can stretch it for a long way before it'll break. And it's very clear and there's just a lot of it. You can make a lot of this stuff. And it's very stretchy and very clear and just very abundant. This is the fertile stuff. When you see this is what you want. When you see this kind of cervical fluid, if you stick your finger up and pull some out, and this is what you see, this is what you want. This is telling you you're in your fertile period. This is very fertile quality cervical fluid. When you see this, it's telling you you're in your fertile time, you're in your fertile window. Now's the time to have intercourse if you want to have a baby. So this type of cervical fluid has a lot of nourishment in it for the sperm. You might have read or heard somewhere that sperm can live for up to 5 days once it's inside your body. And this is why. This type of cervical fluid gives the sperm nourishment. It helps them to stay alive. And it helps them swim faster to where they need to go to wait for the egg to after ovulation for fertilization. So this is the good stuff. This is the stuff that you want. And it's amazing properties, just, clear and very stretchy and very, very flexible that doesn't break. This is the stuff that you want. So when you see this, you know you're in your fertile window. Now, not everyone is going to see this egg white quality cervical fluid. Now that I am older and in declining fertility, I don't see this every single month. I do still see it, but I don't see it every month. Um, Now, just the important thing to know is your body is still producing this. It might not be producing if you're still of childbearing age. You might not be producing enough to really be able to pull it out and look at it, but it is still, you are still producing it. You might not see this quality. Another type of fertile quality cervical fluid is if it's very clear, kind of like saliva, kind of watery and very wet and watery. You could have a very wet sensation. Um, you could have a very wet sensation, and your cervical fluid could be very watery and very wet and clear, sort of like the consistency of saliva, like I said. That is also fertile quality cervical fluid. So it doesn't have to be the egg white, but again, if it's very wet and very watery, that is also fertile quality stuff. So the wet stuff or the egg white stuff is what you want to see. And when you see that, that is when you know that you are in your fertile window and ovulation is coming. Now, you'll probably see the very fertile quality cervical fluid for probably about 4 or 5 days before ovulation. So again, assuming a 14-day ovulation, you could see very fertile quality cervical fluid from day 10 or day 11 until about day 14. And you know that that is your very fertile window. And then once ovulation happens, your cervical fluid will dry up again. And it will remain dry until you get your period the next month, assuming that you did not get a pregnancy. If you did get a pregnancy, then you won't get your period. But the point is, your cervical fluid will be dry. You will not see this fertile quality egg white cervical fluid again in your cycle. You won't see this again until the next cycle, gearing up for ovulation. You won't see that. You won't feel the wet. You won't feel the wet quality cervical fluid. You won't feel that either after ovulation. You might see and experience some of the creamy stuff. This has been known to kind of pop up after ovulation. But again, as I said, this is not fertile quality cervical fluid. But you might see this again after ovulation, and you might see the gummy stuff again too, this really kind of tacky, sticky, gummy stuff. You might see that again too. But the point is, once ovulation happens, you will not see the fertile quality cervical fluid again until your next cycle. Now, if you're like me, some women just don't produce a lot of cervical fluid. I remember that I did when I was younger. So in my case, it's definitely tied to, age, and fertility declines with age. It's going to be different for everyone. Some people might just not produce a lot. And if you start checking your cervical fluid and you find that this is the case for you, that you just don't produce a lot of it, do not despair. There is help for you. There is a wonderful product that you can buy that can help you in your efforts to conceive. And that is this. It is Pre-Seed. This is a lubricant. I totally recommend this for women who don't produce a lot of cervical fluid. Lubricant is awesome if you experience vaginal dryness. There's lots of different lubricants out there that can help kind of enhance sexual activity. What makes this lubricant different from the others is that it is sperm friendly. Most of the commercial lubricants out there are actually spermicides. They are harmful for the sperm. They kill the sperm. So they would inhibit the sperm in getting to their destination, the egg, for fertilization. Pre-Seed is sperm friendly. It does not kill the sperm, so this is good stuff. It's a lubricant that can help you, but can also help the sperm as well. It kind of mimics the egg white cervical fluid in sort of helping the sperm swim to where they need to go. So it won't help you conceive, but it definitely won't inhibit your efforts in conception like another lubricant would. So you get one of these, and here's what it looks like. There's, it's a little tube. There's, you only need a little bit, so a little bit goes a long way. So this little tube will last you for a long time, and that's what it looks like. It even kind of looks like fertile quality cervical fluid. So you check that out. And they put applicators in the box. You can just put some of the lube in here and insert it that way. They give you recommendations on how much to use. I find that I never really need the full amount that they recommend, but you can experiment and see what works for you, how much works, what's the best amount for you. So if you are a person who experiences vaginal dryness or just know that you don't produce a lot of cervical fluid, this is something that you want to pick up because it'll definitely help you in your efforts to conceive. So to sum up, cervical fluid can give you so much amazing information about your fertility. It basically tells you when you're fertile. Basically, when you see the egg white stuff, when you feel the wetness, when you see very wet or very clear or very watery cervical fluid or very egg white, stretchy cervical fluid, that is your fertile time. If you see the lotion stuff, if you see the tacky stuff, if you see the stuff that's kind of like glue, that is not fertile quality cervical fluid. But it's very important to keep tracking it because you want to know when the fertile stuff comes up for you so you know when to start having intercourse. So it's an amazingly powerful tool, and when used in conjunction with your basal body temperature, you're always going to know when ovulation is coming, and you're always going to know when ovulation has happened. So you do not need to buy an ovulation predictor kit to tell you when you're fertile. You do not need to buy a fertility monitor to tell you when you're fertile. Your body, Mother Nature has equipped your body with the most amazing way to tell you every month, each and every month when you're fertile. You do not need those man-made equipment. I think they're great for a backup. I think it's great when you're tracking your cervical fluid and you start seeing the fertile stuff to maybe break out an OPK, to corroborate what you're already discovering for yourself. But you do not need to rely on ovulation predictor kits or fertility monitors. You only need to rely on your own body because Mother Nature has equipped your body with an amazing way to tell you when you're fertile. All you need to do is learn how to collect the data, what to look for, and how to analyze what you find. I hope this information has been helpful. I would love to hear from you. Write a comment below, send me an email with any questions that you have. I'd love to hear from you and hear if this information has been helpful. And I look forward to seeing you again sometime soon. So in the meantime, happy charting, happy cervical fluid tracking, and I'm wishing you all the best on your fertility journey. So baby dust to you. Bye-bye.